When you don't take time to look at it through other people's eyes. Take some time and reflect on what you believe in your soul. Cause that is the key to life. You gotta let the negativity go.
Hello and welcome to What the Fox podcast with your two hosts, Lindsey Fox and Amber Ross. As a reminder, today's episode is sponsored by therapyappointment.com. That is the EMR to go to build and manage your practice if you are a therapist. In addition, because it's the holidays, a lot of people are looking for therapists. So with that being said, if you are in need of a therapist, feel free to go to therapyappointment.com in order to find one near you.
Awesome. Hello, Jay. We are thrilled to welcome you back to the podcast. For those listening, Jay Tinsley is joining us today. He was with us for a couple of episodes in season 1. If you have not listened to those, you need to go back and listen to them because he is an absolute riot and so much fun to have on the podcast.
Understatement.
Right. Understatement of the century. But he's so much fun that we actually convinced him to bring his lovely wife, Nina, on today. Jay, would you like? I know, right? Jay, you want to introduce Nina?
Yeah, well, first, thank you very much for having me back. This is always an enjoyable experience. And apparently people don't mind listening to my rambling. So whenever you want to have me come back on, just say the word.
They actually love your episodes, by the way. People love your episodes. For those listening, Jay popped on for a Father's Day special, and he hopped on for one called Power to the People, which was incredible. So please tune into those.
Yeah. And then today I am blessed to have my partner in everything join me today for this discussion, Miss Nina Tinsley.
Hello.
Woo! Nina.
Yeah. As our daughter said, you have to clap. And then
you have to clap. Yes. Round of applause. We are so grateful to have both of you on. I know Lindsey and I talked a little bit, Jay, I think in your first episode asking maybe if Nina would come on and do one. So then when we had the second one and it was solo, I think this is a little bit of a dream come true for Lindsey and I to have both of you on here because you guys are rock stars. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, super exciting.
We're excited.
Today's episode is going to be a lot of fun, I think, because we are in the thick of holiday season. And a lot of what we're going to cover today is holiday based and how you guys run your family, because you both have diverse backgrounds as far as religious aspects. So I think that's probably the logical place to start. You guys want to share a little bit of maybe where you started or what your religious practices looked like growing up?
Well, I'll start with this because I just think it's interesting. But I remember when we were about to get married, or had just been engaged, the thing that stuck out most to me was that we were an interracial marriage. But I remember Nina's aunt, her bigger concern was that we were an interfaith marriage, and how was that going to work out?
Wow.
It's worked out fine, but it was funny. It was interesting to me that was the bigger concern for her. It's actually quite a relief, actually. She wasn't concerned
for everyone involved.
But he's not a Jew.
Okay, that's
so hilarious. Just for our listeners who are not able to, maybe for our listeners who are not already subscribed on YouTube, which seems to be many of you guys, y'all should jump on that bandwagon. With that, just so y'all know, if you have not seen Jay, he happens to be African American and raised as I'm
a black guy.
There we go. As a Christian who celebrates Christmas and believed in Santa Claus and all that good stuff whenever he was younger. And for Nina, would you like to introduce kind of your faith in all of this too?
Yeah, so I am a white Jew. Both my parents were Jewish, but my mom got remarried when I was pretty young, and her not new husband, that sounds so but her husband, my stepdad, who raised me, is non-Jewish. So I got kind of like the best of both worlds growing up. My entire biological family is, I won't say very Jewish, but pretty Jewish. And by that, I mean culturally Jewish. There's definitely religious aspects that they embraced more, I think, than my mom and dad did. But as far as I grew up culturally Jewish. And then I think what happens for a lot of women moms, they grow up Jewish, they kind of fall away from Judaism. And then when they have kids of their own, they go back to it. And then like rinse and repeat with that cycle of like, that's what happened for me and what happened for my mom. You know, she grew up Jewish, fell away from it. And then as I was getting to be our son's age, probably 7, 8, we started being more Jewish, going to services. I mean, we always celebrated Hanukkah, but more of the religious piece as well. But we also had a Christmas tree, and I wrote letters to Santa and left out cookies and milk by the fireplace. And with John's dad, his parents, you know, we did Easter baskets and hunts and all that good stuff. So
that's awesome. So you did get exposed to both worlds of that then too, just like how your kids are, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty cool. So I would love if you could kind of help educate our audience, those who might not be as familiar with Judaism. Perhaps if you can touch on what does it mean to say when one identifies as being culturally Jewish versus the religious based of Judaism, because I feel this is something that a lot of people don't quite understand, but it's like you kind of see it from the outside, but you don't really understand what it means on the inside and how that plays out.
Yeah, good question. And like, I feel like I need a disclaimer of like, I'm only speaking from my own experience, and like, I'm certainly like not the expert on Judaism.
No, y'all are just experts on yourself and who y'all are as a couple with your kids. And that's what we're looking for.
Okay. So I think like this cultural versus religious aspect, it's like being Jewish is like sort of a way of life. I think it's like, and I'm realizing this more. I read Sarah Hurwitz, I think is her name. She has a book called Here All Along, and she was Michelle Obama's speechwriter, but she's also a Jewish woman around my age, I think. And I'm only like a third of the way through her book, but basically she describes this very similar thing of like a wrestling with the religious aspect of Judaism while still feeling super connected to like what it means to be Jewish. So like when I say I'm culturally Jewish, but not religious, that to me means things like we celebrate like the popular Jewish holidays or like the ones that mean something to us. So like for me, there's a holiday that we called Sukkah. I think a lot of people call it Sukkot. And it's, from my understanding, like a celebration of the fall and being outside and inviting people in to like eat with you. And that was something we did growing up. My stepdad built the structure outside. My mom made fall dinners and we ate for a week outside in our sukkah. And it was just like this really warm, nice thing. Now, I couldn't tell you the religious origins of it, but I have that like feeling connection to it.
Sure. Yeah.
So
it's a family tradition.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And then the things like I have like a pod of Jewish friends here who very like similarly to me are not super religious, but feel culturally connected. And it's like what I imagine Jay and I have talked about, like when he's in a group of Black folks, there's a level of understanding and comfort that just doesn't necessarily exist elsewhere. And that's kind of how I
that
feel.
Shared experience.
Yeah. And we call it the Federation of Jewish Moms. There's like 4 of us, but like,
I love it.
Neuroses and like fake, like I want my kid to be a doctor and like, you know, like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
That kind of, yeah. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Definitely.
And I was going to say, this is certainly not like a scripted thing of interview questions or anything like that. It's just, I was kind of curious just because, you know, a lot of people don't necessarily know what that means. And likewise, even with Catholicism, you know, there's people who might identify as being culturally Catholic versus like really, or, you know, maybe they would say like, or a Sunday Catholic or whatever the case, where it's like, maybe they're not really religious and, you know, getting into the faith-based details of all the things, but there's certain tenets of the culture within Catholicism that people live out. I mean, we just recently had a guest speaker on, Amber Harris, who talks about her faith-based origins and how that plays into like her processing of grief and stuff like that. So
yeah, and I think that exists everywhere, right? Like I was raised Baptist, and there's religious versus spiritual, and you know how that manifests in your day-to-day life. I think that's with all organized religion, there's an aspect of that. And I would say, like, Jay, you would be perfect to kind of answer the same line of question, right? So from your perspective, in how you were raised and how you view yourself spiritually or, from a religious standpoint?
It's interesting. I mean, much of what you've already said, like we've had this conversation offline. Like we talked about like what does it mean to be, culturally Jewish? And I was like, well, honestly, like I wouldn't grow up Catholic, but I went to a Catholic college and I witnessed a lot of the same cultural behavior, I guess. Like folks who weren't super religious celebrated the, some of the more important holidays or well-known holidays. Didn't eat meat on Fridays, had Easter, brunch, but like would never consider themselves religious. So like their families were often large because, no birth control. But like, so there was a lot of cultural, like there was a lot of cultural identity there, but they weren't necessarily religious. As far as I'm concerned, like I was raised Christian, but we didn't go to church at all. So I couldn't necessarily tell you, what our belief structure was or anything like that. And then from a cultural perspective, it's complicated. I mean, I am Black, but like my mom's family was Jamaican, and my maternal grandmother was religious, but again, like West Indian religious, which is just sort of different. And my paternal grandmother, I think she went to church every once in a while. I think she was Methodist, but like she wasn't, I don't know if I would call her God-fearing or God feared her. But either way, like the cultural piece there was not so much tied to religion as it was just like West Indian, Jamaican, Caribbean type situations, and then, Black people from New York.
That's right. I keep forgetting that you're from New York.
Yeah.
I mean, right, there's a lot of cultural elements that come into region as well. So like, as you're talking about that, it's like, gosh, there's a lot that goes into that as well. Do you want to comment on any aspect of the regional piece, since you did mention like Jamaica and New York?
Well, I mean, I guess I would just say is that, yes. I mean, there's definitely certain things about me.
You want an opportunity to comment on something?
I mean, that's a New Yorker in me.
Yeah, that's right. Okay,
stop talking. I talk too fast. But I guess it's more witnessing it. So like through Black Men Run, I've had this opportunity to be around a lot more Black people from a lot of different places, as opposed to like my upbringing. Like, not that I grew up in like a predominantly Black town or anything like that, but the Black people I knew were from Long Island, they were New Yorkers. So getting to interact and engage with Black people from Louisiana versus Detroit versus Colorado, Arkansas, South Carolina, like, and seeing how, I mean, in part religion and their faith, but or their where they were raised and how that influences the nuances in their version of Black culture. It's just very fascinating.
That's a really wonderful point too. And so then I kind of am wondering, so here y'all do have children, biracial children, who are then being exposed to different elements of the cultural and religious tenets of y'all's belief system. So what does that look like? What has this experience been like with y'all having two young kiddos, where it's like, we know that for Christmas, people believe in Santa Claus, but what does Hanukkah look like, for example, for kids?
Yeah. I mean, I think like to take it one step back, I remember, Jay, I don't know if you remember this, we were walking around our neighborhood when either I was pregnant with Mariano or he was really little. And we were talking about like, what are we going to do? Because at that point I was pretty decidedly not religious, but still cultural. Yeah. And something, or my understanding of Judaism is like, Jesus is not a thing. Like Jesus was a guy and who is as important as any other guy in the story. And that to me is like, if I had one takeaway from Judaism growing up, it was like, you do not value a human over others, really. And so when we talked about like, what are we going to do with our kids? I felt uncomfortable thinking about them believing that Jesus was anything other than a guy. And so we like had decided like, we're going to raise them Jewish. We're not going to raise them in church. And so I would say like, they are experiencing both, like, not even religion. They're experiencing both like celebrations, but as for like what I hope they grow up believing is that they are Jewish because they are, because I am, because that's how we're kind of doing. So, Jay, anything to add there?
Well, I will say is that, it's funny because I've often heard, even before we got together, is that in Jewish, and I guess, I don't know if it works with other religions, but Jewish and Christian relationships, if the mom's Jewish, then the kids are Jewish. And I was like, well, that doesn't really seem fair. Not that I would argue it, but I'm like, that doesn't seem fair.
Not
But
that
at
I
the
would
end of the day,
argue
for me,
it,
it's
he
a
says.
practical thing. Like, my kids are absolutely going to be exposed to Christianity because they exist in America. I don't
Yeah.
have to do anything. I just have to open the door, turn on the television. They're going to see all of Christianity,
Mhm.
and whether I want them to or not, frankly. So that wasn't a concern to me. And because religion and or faith were not I don't consider them to be a big part of my identity. They weren't a big part of my upbringing, and I don't consider them to be a major part of my culture. That part wasn't important. So this idea of like, all right, well, we're going to raise our kids Jewish and make sure that they are sufficiently and adequately exposed to Judaism, whatever that means to us at the time. And again, that's evolved. I was fully, I mean, if I remember correctly, call me out if I'm bullshitting right now, but I was fully on board with that.
And I feel like it's like similar to like their blackness. Like they're both white passing or like they've got something going on.
Light skin.
So like just like whiteness wasn't a big part of my identity growing up. And it's only something that I've really like come to understand as an adult, but like they're not hurting for their white side. Like they need the fortification on like the black side, So I feel like it's similar with Judaism. But Hanukkah, we light the candles. We do a present every night, and it's usually like a little something with like the bigger what?
A tchotchke,
just a little something. And then on the last night, it's a bigger something. And then for Christmas, we have a tree. We do. My stepdad always made Christmas sausage that their like local place in Vermont did. So we get sausage from our local place and make omelets, and like they open the presents, but we don't typically buy gifts. We just use whatever gifts have come in, and that's what the Christmas presents are. So we buy the Hanukkah gifts and like our support system. Yeah. And then what else? Oh, and then we leave cookies for Santa.
And there's some gifts from Santa, right?
Oh,
I think it's important to note that I don't purchase any of the gifts.
Hey, Jay, we know. We know.
Yeah.
Moms know.
Wow. Listen, I'm looking at the screen here. You got like 3 of us against 1, and it's just like
I mean, there's that, but also, I grew up in a household that wasn't big on gifts. I hate this AirPod, by the way. It wasn't big on gifts, so it's just not something I orient towards. I don't want gifts for myself. I don't want gifts for other people. But to your point, like I'm just not involved in that. But if I remember correctly, there are gifts from Santa, right? And our reason behind that was that we didn't want them to feel, we didn't want to ruin it for the Christian kids. Like we don't want them going to school and be like, no, mom and dad buy all my gifts. Like, we want them, and there's something about the magic of Christmas and all that nonsense, yada, 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 whatever. So
you see the nonsense. You really sound like you're in the spirit.
I know there's a whole lot to unpack there. One, I want to call out because I know somebody's going to call it out. Santa has nothing to do with Christianity. Would be like the big one, right?
Yeah.
But 2, you say you're not in it for the gifts. You don't want gifts for yourself, for other people. So what is it about the holiday season that like lights you up? What's something you look forward to? Is it like a tradition from childhood, or, what does that look like? I love that Nina just leaned forward and she's like, I can't wait for it.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I don't know if there is anything that lights me up in particular. Like I like the season. Obviously growing up in the Northeast, as we both did, like we actually saw winter and trees and snow and stuff like that. So that part was cool. Don't so much get it here. But that's fine.
Not in Arizona, friend.
I do like, we've really enjoyed like the time off. Like I don't even really take time off, but like as much as I'm like, got to get these kids out of my house, it is nice for us to be off and around and have this free time to do stuff. Like that part is nice.
Quality time.
And we haven't been able to get into it as much as we want to, but this idea of the holidays is when you just like be nice all year round, but it's like this extra push to be nicer. So one of the things, again, we haven't quite got there yet. 'Cause our kids were,
Little.
they were too young, and then COVID. But we want
Yeah,
to
right.
get into acts of service.
I love
Mm.
So
that.
Christmas, the holidays in general, Hanukkah and Christmas aren't just about you getting gifts. One, also start thinking about getting gifts for other people, jerks. They keep on giving me their list. I'm like, what am I getting? Nothing. But also, like, it's just another opportunity to give back to your community, to society, to the universe, whatever. So one of the things we want to start doing at some point, I don't know if it'll happen this Christmas, but or this holiday season. Look at me, Christo normative, but I don't even know if that's a word.
I love
you just
that
made
word.
it up. I love it. Trademark
Mhm.
pending.
I'll go with it. Well, we want to do volunteer work.
Yeah.
We want them to know that this is a great opportunity to give back.
Yeah.
Which, to be clear, we don't do. And the thought, we don't do it the holiday season in particular. And the thought of like adding something else is sometimes overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like because at this age, you have to work so hard to find an opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
do.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's not a
Well,
lot of
and
stuff
I
for
wanted
kids.
to point out what I heard in that, and maybe I misunderstood, but it seemed like, Jay, all signs pointed to you liked the slower pace of the holiday season and the togetherness and the like focused time home to do things. And then simultaneously said, but we want to add more stuff to that so that we're not home to do the things, which I think like that's so that happens to me all the time. I'm like, man, this is so great to be home and do nothing. What can I add to my list to stress myself out? Like,
Yes, sitting in the calm can be really hard. And I think that's just
Yeah,
that,
like
we
we want
want
to
the
fit in
quality
these
time.
trips. We want to go hiking. Like I want to do
Yeah.
all the things, but also chill out. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
ridiculous.
It's
hey,
really
you have little
something.
kids. Like we don't,
Right.
there's not a whole lot of chill out time.
No.
No.
And
I would
I technically work over the holidays. Like when I work at a university and we're skeleton coverage. I did the first 2 years because I was the new guy. I was like, oh, let me cover it to let all the other managers stay home. And now it just sort of makes sense. Again, it's very quiet. There's no reason for me
Right.
not to be on call. But we also can't really go anywhere because I'm on call. We couldn't just like escape to the woods or anything like that. This year, randomly, I have a wedding to go to in Western Mass. So like we're gonna actually separate for the end of the holiday break. So for New Year's Eve, I will spend on a plane. Like when the ball drops, I'll be on a plane all by my lonesome, as my family spends time with another family, our friends, at a
Right.
cabin in the mountains.
Yeah. Oh.
I think too, like the piece about why we do Christmas, like for me, it's selfish in that like I have nice memories of like writing letters to Santa and like,
Yeah.
and so I think in full honesty, if I didn't do that as a kid, I wouldn't do it for them.
Yeah.
And I would like tell them that whatever I need to tell them about Santa and keep it moving. But it brings me a little joy, and so we do it.
Sure. Well, there's nothing wrong
Absolutely.
with having a tradition that brings you joy. It doesn't have to link back to a religious context. And, this is kind of a good segue where I really wanted to share something that I saw this online, and it ended up, it spearheaded a separate conversation I had with one of my clients, because they were like, Lindsey, my kiddo the child is like a adolescent, so not super young like y'all's kids, but they were saying we don't know how to have this conversation with our kid because they're starting to ask about Santa. So I really want to share something that I saw online that I thought was such a beautiful way to explain what Santa is all about, because I feel like it's really echoing sort of the beliefs that y'all are sharing, and I kind of feel like this will help add some language around it as well, because it's quite beautiful, and it goes right back into the acts of service, the idea of acts of service. So this kid asked dad about if Santa's real, and the dad says, well, the truth is a dangerous gift. So once you know something, you cannot unknow it. Once you know the truth about Santa Claus, you will never again understand and relate to him as you do now. So my question is, are you sure you really want to know? And the child says, yeah, I want to know. So dad says, okay, So he's not an old man with a beard and a red suit. That's just what we tell kids. You see, kids are too young to understand the true nature of Santa Claus. So we explain it to them in a way that they can understand. The truth is about Santa is that he's not a person at all. He's an idea. Think of those presents Santa gave you over the years. I actually bought those myself. I watched you open them, and did it bother me that you didn't thank me? Of course not. In fact, it gave me a great pleasure. You see, Santa Claus is the idea of giving for the sake of giving, without a thought of thanks or acknowledgement. When I saw that woman collapse on the subway last week and called for help, I knew that she'd never know that it was me who summoned the ambulance. I was being Santa Claus when I did that. And the son paused and was like, oh. And Dad said, so now you know you're part of it. You have to be Santa Claus too. So now that means you can never tell a young kid the secret, and you have to help us select Santa presents for them. And most importantly, you have to look for opportunities to help people. You got it? And that's how the kid learned about Santa Claus.
I love that.
I really like that. Like, I feel like that would have been helpful to be told as a child.
Right.
Be a better person.
And now you guys can create that cycle of kind of sharing that Santa Claus is real, but it's a real idea, not necessarily a person, but it's the spirit of giving and not being found out. It's an act of service and love for another human.
When I love
But
that it
honestly,
separates it from all of the holidays and makes it something we can all like get behind together. Like, it's not another thing to divide and to like make us all go against each other. It's something that I don't know anybody who would hear that and go, I don't like that. That doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? Like, that just, it's a feel good story that I just love it.
I do too. I like that.
I don't know anyone personally who would go against it, but I'm
mean, there's
fairly
somebody
certain
out
there's.
there.
Yeah.
Jay, those are not our people.
What about Christ? Oh, yeah. But I like that idea in general. That, I mean, honestly, so going back to the religion part of it, those questions are starting to come up. You know, so outside of the holidays, like explaining why you do something, like the meaning behind Hanukkah, like this is not probably not the appropriate term, but it's like sort of innocuous. Like, oh, it's like, yeah, this is why we do this. All right. But like, because there's no like mystical figure behind it necessarily. But oftentimes when you start talking about religion, God comes up, stuff like that, like what happens when we die? And it's like, oh man. And, you know, we have our belief system in our home, but we also want to be very careful not to disparage anyone else's belief system.
Yeah.
We're very, you know, cautious about that. Like the same reason we want to be like, there's no Santa Claus. I don't want our kids to go anywhere and say something that's going to hurt somebody else. So I like this idea of like talking about Santa as a concept. I think that can easily be applied to faith. You know, so it's like, oh, is there a God? I'm like, well, you know, that depends on who you talk to, but this God is like more of this concept, like this reminder, whatever you want to say, to like do good by people, be a decent person, you know,
loving
just
kindness.
for the sake of being a decent person, doing good by people. You know, we've created this thing to like sort of like hover over us and make sure we're doing it. It's like this parent overlord, but really it's just like, you know, just make sure you're doing the right things.
Be kind to one another.
Yeah. Be a decent person.
Yeah, we need more of that in today's world. So whatever you want, whatever label you want to put onto it, and if it's attached to religious belief or ideology, that's fine, but just be a good human in today's world. We need more good humans, period.
Yeah, this made me think of God too, because for me, like in my return to Judaism, the God piece was a pretty big stumbling block, because in my mind, like I hear God and I think like, I mean, a skinny Santa Claus basically. And I'm like, not into that, and couldn't then reconcile my like belief in, or like going to temple or saying the prayers when God is part of it. If I don't believe in God, it makes me feel like disingenuous. But then I read this book and was talking to Jay's friend, Rabbi Sarah, and she like, in Judaism, there's an umbrella of what God means. And like, Jesus does not fall under the umbrella, but like what I say, like the universe, or like that like more spiritual stuff does. That there is not like a person God necessarily. And once that was sort of like, once I was like wrapped my mind around that, it became much easier for me to talk to our kids about what God means. And I had a conversation with my son recently, and like, we both kind of agreed that for us, God is like a sparkly wind. But still, when I hear that word, I think a person. And so kind of like getting that and like helping him find his own way of what God means, when even for me, I'm finding my own way these days about what that means too, it is in line with the Santa Claus story, I think.
I'm so glad you shared that, because as y'all were talking, the question in the back of my mind was, wow, like how do you teach the tiny humans, right? Because the tiny humans have all the questions that are really hard to answer, and they make you second guess everything you've ever known about like the existence of the world. So I love that you share that, because I think it's so useful to see how other parents are navigating that and how other people are kind of having those conversations. And I do think that the sweet Santa Claus story is one that can be used in all different areas. So thank you so much for sharing that. I know sometimes it can be scared to share like parenting information because of all of the haters out there. So just shout out. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we definitely we're very open to hearing all different perspectives, because that's just it. It's like, that's what makes the world go round. There's no, if one person wants you to fit in a box, tell them, screw it. I don't care about your box. We don't live in a box.
One of the things I really appreciate about one, Nina's just much more willing to have conversations about those things, or any conversation.
Y'all would not be together if she weren't. Like, let's be real.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's fair. We wouldn't still be together if she wasn't for her conversations. But I think being willing to talk and being willing to adjust and to evolve, like, that's so good for kids to experience. Like, as opposed to like, these are the rules. This is exactly how it goes. This is the only thing you can believe forever. As opposed to like, well, I'm not really sure, but this is how I think of it. And I think that opens the door for the kids to say, all right, well, I mean, a sparkly breeze might not be my thing, but you know what? It sounds like you're giving me the freedom to think about it in my own way. And I think that's really, really cool. And I'm very thankful that she's involved in those kind of conversations. Like, I know I've had them in a different kind of way with the kids. But I like that she comes at it with that approach. Again, like, it's malleable.
Yeah.
There's nothing set in stone. And that allows them to evolve with whatever they're learning and developing and thinking at the time.
Yeah, it plants a seed for them to be a free thinker, and for them to do some research and figure out how they feel about something, and what they think about something. And you don't know the ripple effect of how that impacts their interactions with other people. And it sounds like, for me, and at least like listening to you two talk, I'm not surprised at all, but I imagine your kids as very open-minded, very welcoming, very like easy to, I don't want to say blend in with any crowd, but like be in a crowd, be confident and comfortable, and also like open to other people's differences. So I think that's really awesome that that's just the picture I have of them. Obviously, I've not met your children, but I've seen some stuff on social that would lead me to believe that.
I think that y'all's kids, actually, Amber and Eric's kids, and then y'all's kids would be like hilarious together.
Yes, I agree.
Because Amber and Eric also have very free thinking children with their own opinions. But I think, what I have seen in just getting to know, all of y'all over the years, and Nina, for you, it's been more through like social media, obviously, but like, I think that a common theme that y'all all share, and I do think is really beautiful to see among parents, is raising children to not only be free thinkers, but to understand that you do not need external validation to have your own opinions or your own feelings of comfort, that you're allowed to have your own opinion of I do feel comfortable or I do not feel uncomfortable, and I do not need to get external validation to prove that I'm feeling uncomfortable or comfortable in this moment of time. I love that you're all role modeling a healthy scope of just, of humility, frankly, of also being able to say, like, you know what, I'm not really sure. I don't know the answers to this,
Yeah.
but if I were to take a guess, like, it kind of looks like this. I think that offers a lot of safety for children to feel like they too can say, I don't really know, or I don't know the answer to this. And they're not feeling pressured and being raised in an environment and feeling pressured to be on and to always have the answer and be the yes person.
And I tell
It's
you,
just,
I'm glad you brought that up because some of the most wild and fun conversations that I've had with my kids are when they ask me something and I don't know the answer. And we get to go down that foxhole and figure it out together, like pulling out the books, going to the library, pulling up Google, like whatever that looks like. Those have been some of the most fun because it's always like 9 o'clock at night. It's something's totally random. Like we're trying to get the kid to sleep. And there's some left field question that, of course, my brain loves information. I love fact-finding missions.
just
So
like your
then,
children.
right. So then I'm like, bet, let's go. Like, let's figure it out together. So it's a lot of fun. And if I could encourage like the parents listening and even like people, if you don't have kids and you think of a question that's left field, bring somebody else onto that journey with you because it's really fun to see the different information and have that conversation of like, how does that make you feel? What does that make you think? And I do think that it empowers children specifically in a different way to not have the answer, but to be empowered to find the answer and not just accept, well, I don't know, moving on.
Or accepting
know-
the fact that someone's saying it is this way and only this way, and that's
Oh,
it.
yeah, that too.
It's funny. I sort of do this at work. I mean, I'm a financial aid administrator. I do not work in an emergency room. Like, no one's going to die if they don't get an immediate response. But so often we feel the pressure to give somebody an answer immediately. And I'm just like, wait a second. I don't know. Let me pause. Let's do some research. And I think, I don't know. I mean, again, I've talked about my mom plenty. I'm taking shots at her. She didn't have the time and the resources to
Lois is
invite
loved.
questions, let alone
Yeah,
like,
Lois is loved, friend.
Lois is loved. But it was just easier to say, no, it is what it is. Like, just give an answer and just move along.
Yeah.
I don't really want to talk about this. I don't have the time to do the research. I mean, internet, like, it just, I mean, she was going through the Encyclopedia
God, you
Britannica
sounded old.
that she paid $1,200 on, like,
You
miserable.
sounded
So you
old
just
as
say
hell.
something. I know. You just say something and move along. Whereas we have more of the most valuable resource right now, which is time. To say, all right, I don't know the answer to that. Like, also, I'm not afraid to say I don't know. My kid's not going to think any less of me if I say I don't know. Frankly, I try to say that more so they stop asking me questions, but they won't think any less of me if I say I don't know. Let's look that up,
That's a good trick.
I'm seeing why Nina ends up answering these conversations and not you, because he
She's
says,
like,
I don't know.
"This is
Like,
what
I
I've been
already
saying."
saw right through that, Jay.
Yeah. They know if they want a 30-minute conversation, who to talk to.
That's so
But
funny.
I don't want to do the research. So if we actually
No, she does not want to do the research.
I send them to Jay. Go ask Pop, look it up, see what he can find. He likes to find information on his phone. He processes it quickly. He'll remember it forever. Ask him for that. And then we'll wade through the like intellectual muck together, kids.
That's such a
That's
good
amazing.
team. I love it. So this has been, like, per usual and expectedly, a windy conversation of so much fun and so many different topics and ideas. I want to ask, kind of like, as we wrap up, is there one big thing that you want folks to take away from the conversation as far as, raising kids in an interfaith, interrace situation? Is there something that, like, a gift that you'd like to share or just a reminder?
I really appreciate, I really appreciate what Nina said earlier about our kids are not going to have any issues identifying with white. Like, we don't actually have to emphasize that. But I have always felt some kind of way. Like, when I was younger, if you were biracial, you had the drop of paint effect. Like, you were black. It didn't matter. You didn't get a choice in that. And as a result, oftentimes, like, people were denied a huge part of themselves. Like, you don't have to be one or the other. You're a little bit of a lot of things. but like people are just like, you're just a black kid, you know, and unfortunately society would treat you as such. But so I don't like, I'm always like, while I want to promote blackness and make sure they feel comfortable and confident in their blackness, I'm always, you know, I've always been a little bit anxious, like, well, I don't want to deny their whiteness either. That's also very important. That's a part of you. There's culture. You guys don't season your chicken, but like there's culture in that. Like, you know, that's
Some of us do.
Did you really just
That's-
do that? Did you just really diss our chicken?
I'm dropping memes.
White people.
I happen to
chicken.
love cooking.
Yeah.
My chicken
Gotta be a
tastes
white
damn
people
good.
joke at some point. Remember the
It's
white
fine.
man's coffee?
We'll allow it.
Oh,
That's right. The white man's coffee. That's right.
but you know, so her saying that makes me feel a lot better. That's similar to like, you know, I imagine, I don't know if she's ever had any qualms about like, well, we're not highlighting Christianity. Well, you don't need to. One, I don't care. But also like, it's there, it exists. Like whiteness will always be a part of their lives.
Right.
And as long as we don't spend any time demeaning it, you know, we celebrate everything, you know, because we try to celebrate everyone. But I thought that was one of the big takeaways. Like, I know that's something that I've historically personally struggled with, you know, like I pro-black, but that doesn't mean anything else is down.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay,
Pro
that's
doesn't
not
mean anti to
anything.
other.
I just need to be, you know, in our world today, we need to make sure that there is pro-black, but it doesn't mean anti anything else. And you should be very
course.
proud of all the things that you are.
It's beautiful.
I don't know that I have words of wisdom really. Yeah.
And that's okay. I love everything you shared. I know there's going to be people that listen to this that go, no words of wisdom. Did you hear XYZ that she said at like minute whatever? Because you definitely dropped some good stuff here. So we appreciate that. And we're so grateful for you two spending some time with us.
Yeah, this is great
today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I give a word of wisdom for my wife?
Jay,
gosh,
of course
can
you can
you?
have the last word.
I
Go ahead.
don't speak for her, but one of the things I think she has been amazing at is
I'll lean in for this one.
curating
Yeah, I
her
like
tribe.
this.
So
yeah.
even beyond like the Federation of Jewish Moms, like she has a posse of people with whom she can talk about all the challenges of parenting, marriage, and stuff like that. And she's not living in a silo. She doesn't deal with anything in a silo.
Mm.
I'm not afraid to talk about stuff, but I kind of just like, you know, old school man mentality. Like I'm like, I'll just deal with it on my own. And like I function all right, but I'm always impressed with her for building that tribe, curating that tribe of people that she feels comfortable sharing information with, receiving, you know, feedback from, and then growing from there. And that's helped me so much in my parenting. Like I have all these dads now, and I mentioned them during the Father's Day podcast. Like I have all these dads now that we just talk through certain things that like I don't know if I would have had that before, you know.
Yeah.
And I owe that entirely to her. Aside from my brother, like I wasn't, you know, I don't talk to any other dads frequently enough to get that from, and she's helped bring that into my life.
That is beautiful.
Actually, now that you've said that, I do have a word of wisdom, or like, I mean, that was like a very intentional thing that I feel like a lot of young, like women our age-ish have like embarrassment around or shame around or shyness around of like, I'm in my 30s and like my friends have moved away and like I don't have like my people here anymore, and cultivating that like intentionally and being pretty shameless about saying like, I want to be your friend. Like, can we hang out? I'm looking for new friends. Or like, I mean, I think it was 3 years ago, there were like 3 women on my list for New Year's. I was like, I'm going to become friends with them this year because like, I think that we'll be good friends.
Mhm.
And
I love that.
so like cultivate, it's not something that like happens by magic because like I have a winning personality. It's like, you have to like do the
But
work.
you do.
I mean, that's a side benefit, right? But like
But it's a bonus.
and I know a lot of people who have been in that situation, but it's like, how do you make friends as a grown-up? I don't know. And so being
You
bold
reach out to
about-
people and say, hey, I want
Yeah.
a friend. I think we'd be cool
That's
together.
right.
Let's try to get to know each other. And I think that's great.
Yes. I did that twice this week, as a matter of fact. I'd just like to pat myself on the back. Been
It's
trying to
hard.
reestablish a friend group now that I'm in a totally different state. And so It has been, I went up to someone, started talking, which I'm great at talking to strangers, but I don't always want to ask for their phone number. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it is hard to do at this age because most people are kind of like settled in their own routine and way of being,
I'm really glad you shared that because I didn't want to volunteer that on your behalf, but I think it's important to normalize that it's okay to be bold and to ask for what you need, because if you don't ask, then you have a 0% chance of getting it. Like, people are not mind readers.
Absolutely. Girl, you got mad at me for talking to strangers whenever I was walking Ellie.
I just worry sometimes.
I mean, I do introduce myself with ease. But anyway, I did meet Jay on Craigslist as well.
Yeah.
So
see,
I get
and
it.
people wonder why I worry. Like, I just have a special place
Hey,
in my mind
that was
that gets to
dangerous.
worry.
Right?
Look how well
lucked
that turned out.
You happen to be a normal person. Oh, when
Hi,
we
little
have your
friend.
photo joining.
Happy holidays.
Oh,
Sweetie.
I love that. That's so perfect. I wore my Christmas tree cake earrings.
Love them. Oh, hey, sweetie. We hope you feel
They're
better.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I think this was a wonderful conversation. Lots of great takeaways for our listeners. And I can already tell there's going to be another episode where both of you come back, because I'm sure that we'll come up with some fun ideas. So just thank you for taking the time and for sharing with us.
Happy
Thanks.
Hanukkah,
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone who's listening. And please don't forget to tune in on our social media platforms. You can also find us, just go by going to youtube.com/@whatthefoxpodcast or linktree/whatthefox. And we hope to have you join us on our new platforms. And please rate this episode, because it does help us get boosted in the algorithm so we can attract new listeners. So thank you, everyone. We will see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.
And we all sing, everything is gonna be just fine. It's gonna fall into place. The sun is gonna set on your terrible day.